Hi, and welcome to another session of Vision of Growth. I'm your host, Larry Sassano, and I'm the president of the Economic Development Council serving Okaloosa County, Florida. My special guest today is Dr. David Goetsch, who is a longtime friend, mentor, and everyone knows Dr. Goetsch. So welcome, Dr. Goetsch, to our show. And of course, this year, Dr. Goetsch is the chairman of the EDC, and of course, he's vice president for community relations and workforce development at Northwest Florida State College. Dr. Goetsch, let me just read. I know if someone doesn't know this about you, they've probably been out of the country for a number of years, but let me just read this brief bio. Dr. David Goetsch has authored over 70 books in the fields of business, management, leadership, and economic development. He is perhaps one of the most widely published college professors in the United States. 4 of his books are bestsellers, and 3 have been translated into foreign languages. He is co-founder, past president, policy board member of the EDC serving the Okaloosa County area, and, as I said, is currently the chairman. He has served as president of each of our local chambers of commerce, founder of the Technology Coast Manufacturing and Engineering Network, which is TechBen, co-founder and past chair of the Gulf Coast Alliance for Technology Transfer, or GCAT, and was awarded the Florida Economic Development Council's Economic Development Volunteer of the Year to the Northwest Florida region 3 separate times. Dr. Goetsch, it's a pleasure to have you on and to have known you all these years, and I know we'll continue our relationship. But let's talk about your passion for economic development. And you know, I met you many years ago, and I was impressed by the first publication that I saw that you did for economic development. Tell us about what brought your interest into that focus.
Well, when I came into higher education, I was running programs that prepared students for jobs. Yeah. I had all of the technical programs at the college. And at that time, we had quite a few of them. In fact, about half of the college's enrollments were in technical programs that stopped at the associate degree level, stopped 2-year level, yeah, and sent students, graduates out to get jobs. And I very quickly learned in a small community like ours, that's only half the job. If you're preparing people for jobs on the left hand, you'd better be creating jobs for them on the right hand, or all your college is a brain drain. And so to prevent our college from being a brain drain, we got very actively involved in economic development, and I was asked to spearhead that effort. And so since 1976, I've been the college's economic development guy. And that little book that you were talking about that you read when you were at the Department of Commerce.
That's right.
Even before we met, I think you had a copy of that book, and it was not aimed at economic development professionals like you. It was aimed at college personnel like me, telling them the same thing. Unless you want to be a brain drain, you need to get involved in economic development, start creating jobs.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I remember very distinctly. It was around 1981, or I was sitting in my office in the Collins building in Tallahassee, Florida, and I got this book, and I read through it, and I said, "Oh my God, this is fantastic!" You know, and then shortly after that, we were at a conference together, and that's where I sat next to you. I remember. I can't remember where the conference was, but I remember sitting next to you and talking to you about that, and that was my first opportunity to meet with you. So, and then to follow that line, you, I guess I bugged you for several years to write another edition of that, and one day Dr. Goetsch walked in my office and said, "Guess what?" And I said, "You wrote the follow-up to the Economic Development Primer." He said, "That's right."
Economic Development 101, yeah. And you might mention who's on the cover of that book.
Well, Dr. Goetsch is on the cover, of course, and let me, I think that's a cute story. So we were in our offices, Dr. Goetsch walked in, and Kay Rasmussen and I were sitting there, and Caroline was in the front, and Dr. Goetsch said, "Would you both step outside, and do you have some shovels?" Of course, we had the gold shovels, and which we use for grand openings or ribbon cutting or different ceremonies. And he said, "Do you have a camera?" And Caroline says, "Well, I have my camera." So we went outside at the campus there, and we stood together. Caroline took, I think, 2 shots, and that was for the cover of your Economic Development 101.
And now you're famous all over the world.
Well, thank you for that. Well, let's move on and talk about how many years have you been a professor?
36.
36 years, wow.
Mhm.
That's a great career, too, and a polished career. You're moving on shortly. What are you going to pursue as you move on from being a professor for that period of time?
Well, I retired from the college on December 16th, and of course, as of October 1, I became chairman of the board of the EDC, so a lot of my work in the first year after my retirement will be with EDC.
Yes.
And of course, that's as a volunteer. In terms of professionally, what I'm going to do is return to the private sector with a company called Human Resources Solutions. That's Lane Reese's company,
Yes.
as you know. And I'm going to do for Lane the same type of corporate training that I've been doing for the college since 1976. We have, in economic development, one of the things that we focus on is retaining the businesses that we have. In fact, that's the first thing we focus on, as you know. That's doesn't always get as much publicity, but the first priority is always retaining the businesses that you have. Well, if you want to retain a business, there's only two ways you can really help them. You can help them increase their sales volume, or you can help them decrease the cost of doing business.
Right.
Well, we can do some things to help increase sales volume. Yeah. But on the other side, we can do a lot to help decrease the cost of doing business, because if we provide training and consulting that helps them become more efficient, improve their quality, improve the value that they provide to customers, learn how to truly do more with less and do it more efficiently, we're cutting the cost of business for them. And so our corporate training is aimed at that. And as you know, we've done a lot of corporate training for our members through the EDC over the years, yes. And that will continue too.
That's been a great asset for the area, for the businesses, for the college, and for the EDC particularly, because as you said, 80%, maybe higher today, with this economy, probably 90% of growth comes from the existing industry base. So those corporate programs have been, I've had people come up to me, and I've got to tell the audience this story. Tim McDonald passed away, about a year and a half ago. I was in his office one day, and Dr. Goetsch had just completed some training for his folks. And Tim looked at me and he said, I tried to find a selfish motive in David Goetsch doing these programs. He says, I couldn't find one. I said, that's probably the greatest compliment you can give someone is what you just said,
Sure.
And coming from Tim, that was a very sincere and honest, because he was a very upfront gentleman. I thought that, I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but that was a neat comment from him.
No, that's very meaningful. Tim was a friend and a colleague, as you know, and I'm still associated with his company, Fort Walton Machining. Tim's son, Tim Jr., and Greg Britton are doing an outstanding job of running that company. And we were all concerned about what would happen to Fort Walton Machining after, Tim's wife, Jan, his son, Tim, and Greg Britton, who was his operational manager, have stepped in and just done an outstanding job. Yes, so the company is continuing to survive and thrive even during these very, very hard times.
I had an opportunity to talk to Jan and Tim about what they're doing now in these tough times, and they've diversified even further.
They have.
And I think that shows that they're carrying on the real mission of what Tim Sr. Proposed to do when he came here in '97, and that was to create a more diversified type of a precision machining shop. And so that's great to see that they're doing it, and it's great that you're on board with them too. I know that Bill Grant is also serves on their board.
He's on the board of directors, Bill is.
And we had, through our tech men, he was one of our chairmen, and what a great leader he was to complement your program, the TechMen program, because he actually, at that time, when Bill was chairman of Techmin, he brought in, with the Boeing company, that $1.2 billion C-130 contract, and that was a 10-year contract. And Bill made the statement in front of the Techmin members. He said, I'm going to try to guarantee that at least 60% of the contract work with this contract will be with local companies. And son of a gun if he didn't do that.
He did. You know, when under Bill's leadership, our local Boeing office had over 600 employees.
That's right.
It's one of our largest companies
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
All of our local companies are dealing with the effects of the downturn of the economy and the downturn in the military. Of course, today Eglin has just made those announcements, and so one of our challenges during this year is going to be to do as much as we can to help our defense contractors and our government-related things while continuing an effort that you and I have worked on for more than just this year, which is doing exactly what Tim did. We want to diversify Okaloosa County's economic base in the same way that Tim diversified the business base for his company, and as they continue to do that there. And that means we're going to have to recruit non-government work, and we're doing that. We're doing that, and we're going to have to focus even more on that. If this program were a little later in January, we'll be able to announce a major project in conjunction with Judge Pat Maney. You and I have talked about that.
Yeah.
Pat is hard at work. Pat Maney is people do not realize, because he does everything he does so quietly, how much he does for this community. But I don't know anybody who works harder on behalf of veterans than Pat Maney. He really, really goes all out, and particularly for veterans who are in need of medical care. So Pat is working behind the scenes on a project that he will bring to the EDC in January, and I've already committed that will be one of my projects for this year. So you and I will be meeting with Pat, and I think with his connections, his influence, and his determination, we might have a major economic development-ish project there.
That's fantastic. You know, Pat has already been a good friend of the EDC. And you're right about that veterans issue. And, you know, it's interesting, Dr. Goetsch, I'm finding that the veterans programs at the federal level are more important today than ever before. And we can thank, you know, Jeff Miller and Pat Maney for that. I think we owe a lot to them for the fact that there's been a lot of emphasis placed on that. And, you know, I think that we look at certain grants, and when I talk to the federal government, like the U.S. Department of Commerce, they always say to me, Larry, look at trying to hire veterans for this grant application, because that gets high marks, higher than ever before today in the federal government.
Well, and it's going to be an even more important issue with not just Eglin making cuts, but the military. I actually think it's unfortunate. I do not agree with a policy that's going to attempt to balance America's budget on the back of the military. I don't think this is a time that, you know, it's always a dangerous thing to do, but I don't think there's ever been a time when it is more dangerous to make cuts to the military than now. There are a lot of bad people in this world who don't like America and are determined to destroy us. And what stands between them and us, our freedom and our well-being, is the military. And so making cuts to that is ill-advised, I think, but it's going to happen. That's how politics works. And so we're going to have to deal with that, and that's going to be one of our challenges during my year as chairman of the board of the EDC. And it's very interesting, because this is how we got into all of this. We founded the EDC, myself and Lamar Roberts and Bob Richburg and several other business leaders. Larry was one of them. What we had heard was that President Bush the First was going to make 25% cuts to defense contracts.
Right.
As soon as he was, in his presidency, and of course that would have an effect on us. So we knew we were going to have to be heavily engaged in economic development to reach out. retain as much of that as we could and diversify. And so what you and I are going to do this year is an extension of what we've been trying to do since 1991 and have had some success with.
Well, let me ask you, you already touched upon my next question by what I was going to ask you was, what do you see as your focus for the EDC this coming year? And you already started to outline that, but I also see that you talked about diversification, which definitely is important for us to work on this year. But at the same time, the military, which has always been high precedence of consideration for the EDC in our activities. But unlike any other EDC that I am aware of in the state of Florida, we focus a lot of our attention on the military and the defense contractors. And I don't see that changing, but I see the diversification as you pointed out, as an important part of what we're going to be doing in the near future.
I think 3 words. If you know how you have to have your little taglines for your year when you're chairman of the EDC or chairman of the chamber or whatever, and I've of course done all of that. But my 3 words this year would be retention, expansion, and diversification.
Yes.
First, we want to retain as much of what we've got as we can. In a downturn time, we want to hold on to our jobs. Second, we want to expand those where we can.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities for that, and you're working on some. And of course, then we want to diversify. And on the diversification front, although we cannot talk publicly about the projects we're engaged in, you've got a lot of good projects going.
Yeah, we do.
You've got a lot of good projects going, and I'm encouraged that even in this very difficult economy that we're facing and going to continue to face, growth is going to, I keep describing it as the Nike swoosh. It fell fast, but it's going to climb up very, very slowly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably going to continue to be true for a good while, at least the next 5 years. So during economic times like that, we're very fortunate to be our county is doing better than any county in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Our unemployment's lowest. Our growth is best. It's not where we'd want it to be if times were better, but it's better than it probably could be if we weren't working so hard on it with times being as bad as they are.
Yes. You're right. We are doing well, and I think it's the fact that we have that military component there and the contractors. So we're going to have to work with that, and we're going to talk about that in a second with your one of your new appointments. But I want to point out something else. So we have a lot of projects that some of them have no relationship to the military. They are diversified. They're a new, I would say, economic stimulator potential for our economy, which will grow perhaps another subsector and an emerging industry that we don't have presently in Okaloosa County. So that's exciting. Even so I'm talking about this pharmaceutical company we've been working on. We should know something in terms of the decision from the corporate on that probably by first part of December. So that's right around the corner. But I think that one other aspect that's important is the confidentiality. You mentioned that we can't share a lot of the information. I don't think people understand why it's so important to maintain that confidentiality for these companies when they're evaluating our area and other areas of the state or other areas of the country. So I'd like to just talk to you about that just for a second. Confidentiality has been around for a long time in economic development. I saw some legislation that wanted to do away with it. But we know our representatives here, Senator Gates and Representative Gates, they are fully behind supporting it and continuing it because it protects the company and protects the employees. And so there is misunderstandings about what this company's proposing to do, whether it's here or someplace else. And that's a shame because we lose a lot of visibility in what we do because it's hidden behind this confidentiality. But I've never found a better way of helping a company than to keep it quiet until they're ready to make that announcement.
Yeah, you've hit on an important point. Now, the Sunshine Law, or the concept of doing government in the sunshine, has no greater advocates than Senator Don Gates or his son, Representative Matt Gaetz. The Gaetz and Gaetz team really are very much about open government, and that's a good thing. But they also are big advocates of economic development. So they understand the confidentiality issue, and they understand that the confidentiality issue with regard to bringing new jobs to Okaloosa County is one of those places where we have to tread more carefully when we implement the Sunshine Law. So we have good friends in the legislature with the Gaetz and Gaetz team, the way I refer to them, very good friends. And of course, I don't know if people here understand what an amazing achievement it is that our own Senator Don Gaetz is now going to be president of the Senate. Oh. I mean, we are the smallest part of Florida, as you know, Larry. You take all of the Panhandle, take all of Northwest Florida. There are condominiums in Miami that have more voters in them than the Panhandle. So we're small. We're the little guys. You know, we're the part of the map that occasionally gets left off the map when they print it. So for Senator Gaetz to be able to achieve that is just incredible, and it's a great credit to him, and it's a great asset to us.
Of course,
because when our senator speaks, everybody now listens, and of course our representative is probably, I think Matt Gaetz is probably way more influential than a representative in his first term might be, because he's very close to the governor, and the governor admires him very much. They share a lot of the same views. And what I like about the governor and Matt Gaetz and Don Gaetz is they're all about jobs. Yeah. They're all about jobs and economic development.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into this last issue before we run out of time. And jobs, I was in front of our workforce board, and I told them, I said, I was evaluating the projects we have in potential for jobs, because everything is about jobs with the governor and with EDCs. I think it's safe to say that this coming year, we're looking at least 800 to 1,000 new jobs from existing companies, and I haven't even calculated the new companies yet. So I think we're in for a good year for job growth. But I want to jump into this letter that I have in front of me from the Senate President. It says, Dr. Goetsch, it is my pleasure to appoint you to serve as a member of the Florida Defense Support Task Force. Your appointment is effective immediately and expires July 1st, 2015. So this new task force, basically being effective immediately, tell us about what you see your role being in this new Defense Task Force.
Well, the task force role is, big picture, is to make sure that Florida is and continues to be as military friendly as possible, because everybody thinks from outside of Florida, they think of Florida as just a tourism state. That's a huge part of our economy. But did you know that what's second in Florida? Agriculture. Yeah. And third is military. So, right. Military is very important to us. We have the number of bases that we have in Northwest Florida is per capita more than you have anywhere else, other than perhaps right around Washington, D.C. And so military is important to us. We have been through, and you and I in the past 30-something years, I don't remember how many BRACs, but a lot. And when we go through these BRACs, or when we go through these downsizing efforts like Eglin announced today, we want to make sure that we do the best we can with what we've got, hold on to as much as we can, and benefit if possible. Yeah. And we have benefited from BRACs in the past. This task force that's its job. It's to help the governor and the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House make sure that we in Florida are doing everything we can to make Florida a military-friendly community. And so, look at the names on this. This is from Okaloosa. This is a statewide task force now, and we have from Okaloosa County Representative Matt Gaetz on it, Judge Pat Maney, J.R. McDonald from over at Boeing. I'm
Lockheed
on
Martin.
it. Yeah.
Lockheed Martin.
So, or Lockheed Martin, that's right, from Lockheed Martin. And there's also a Dr. Ed Nagyar from Lynn Haven, which would be Tyndall.
Yes.
So Northwest Florida is very, very adequately represented on this statewide task force, yes. And that will give us an opportunity to ensure that whatever this task force does to make Florida military friendly, Northwest Florida bases are a part of that, and and a part that is representative of the large percentage of the military they represent in Florida.
Excellent. Yeah, I was thrilled to see your name on that list, not only because I feel that you're going to represent that task force well for our area and for all of Florida, but also because it's timely for your being the chairman this year of the EDC and wear this dual role, since we pay so much attention to working with the military. And as you mentioned, the fact that there was an announcement today about the proposed adjustments with the air armaments and the Air Force that's going to impact Eglin. But I feel that with your leadership this year, we're going to help work through some of those with the military and with our membership. And so I'm just really looking for a good year. And I thank you for taking on the chairmanship again. This is the second time you've done this for us. And timely as it may be, because when I came on board in '97, you were at that time the head of the EDC, and you are back again, so almost 15 years later. But
Start my career
it's been a good road.
Start my career with you and end my career with you. It's I can't think of anything I would rather do to end my career than chair the EDC again.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this session. I wish we had more time, Dr. Goetsch. I always enjoy talking to you and getting your input on the current issues, and looking for a good year. We think that we're placed in the right position to generate a lot of activity, good diversification, some good high-paying jobs for this economy, and stay the leader in the state of Florida in terms of economic development.
You bet.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our show. Dr. David Goetsch, Vice President of Northwest Florida State College, current Chairman of the EDC. I'm your host, Larry Sassano. Thank you for joining us.